Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Seeing her husband with his mistress in court, the girl merely smirked. And when she handed the judge an important document, the mistress rushed away. Patricia Rowland arrived at the cafe 10 minutes earlier than the agreed time, but Alandra Lagos seemed as though she had long been sitting at the far table by the window, fenced off with artificial ivy, resembling a garden gazebo. Not the most well-appointed place and not very clean either, but close to Alandra's workplace. It would have been uncouth to ask Alandra to trek across the city on public transport in the middle of the workday for a few minutes of conversation, only to return on the same transport. Patricia had more flexibility with her time and her own transportation. Once Patricia asked how Alandra had the patience to commute across the city to work at this salon. The answer was simple and pragmatic. Salon Neapolis was prestigious and popular, with high foot traffic and good earnings. Getting a job here was a stroke of luck. Anyone wouldn't be hired, so you just grit your teeth and bear it. Alandra proudly referred to herself here as a nail service master. It turns out, this was a step above just being a manicurist. Patricia was completely distant from the rules of this manicure world, indifferent to glamour, and never bothered with the prestige of salons. 2 years ago, a friend simply recommended Alandra to her, saying she was a genuinely pleasant girl who quickly grasped all of the client's wishes, and you could even have a chat. Patricia didn't have any elaborate wishes, she just liked chatting with a nice person, so after 6 months, she and Alandra communicated as friends. Patricia simply found formal communication burdensome. As she saw it, it was only suitable for institutions like schools, police, and customs. The owner of Neapolis couldn't have known that. But Alandra earned Patricia's respect for her ability to establish informal relationships with clients. In general, Patricia and Alandra got along very well, although they didn't become friends and never met outside the salon. Usually, instead of going through the salon's administrator, Patricia simply called Alandra and asked her to schedule her for a convenient time for a pedicure or manicure. Everything was always fine, no hitches, so Alandra never called back. And suddenly, yesterday, before Patricia could send the drawings to the client or even think about dinner, she received a call from Alandra. Surprised, Patricia, who wasn't planning on going to the salon anytime soon, had no idea what could have happened, so she said, "Hello, Alandra, an unexpected call. Did you quit Neapolis? Or are you suddenly informing regular clients about moving to a new level?" "Psst on you," Alandra laughed somewhat unnaturally. "I'm fine, I just have an important conversation. We absolutely must meet soon. It won't take much of your time, but it's very important. And the conversation can't be over the phone? At least in a couple of words, what's it about?" "Yeah, not over the phone," confirmed Alandra. "I'm working at Marseille tomorrow and the day after, but I can meet after work. Though it'll be 9 p.m. already." "Oh, no, after work is not an option, then you'll be like a squeezed lemon," Patricia retorted immediately. "I just sent materials for the client to contemplate today. They'll definitely be pondering for 2 days, and I have another long-term project, so I'm relatively free for now, and I can drop by during your break." "Well, if it's convenient for you, let's do that." "Thanks. Let's meet at noon. I have a slot available for an appointment then. I'll be waiting at the Elegy Cafe, on the corner where everyone usually grabs coffee to go." In this Elegy Cafe, under the shade of worn artificial ivy, Alandra waited for Patricia. "Have you been waiting long?" "I even arrived earlier, it seems," Patricia said. "No, not really, just 10 minutes. I purposely came early, in case someone showed up without an appointment, just out of sheer bad luck, and then you'd have to wait for me," Alandra replied. "Oh, come on," Patricia said with a conciliatory smile, "as long as it's worth it. So, spill your secrets." Alandra diverted her focused gaze somewhere beyond the bar counter, and something in her expression suddenly told Patricia that the news wasn't intriguing or funny. The waiter approached. They ordered double espressos. Alandra seemed to force herself to liven up a bit, fluffing her fluffy hair, and said, "All right, there's no point in dragging it out. Maybe you remember, I told you a long time ago that in our line of work, we hear a lot of personal stuff from clients. Well, many of us become conduits in the gossip chain. Alandra, of course, I remember. We discussed the specifics of our work during the entire pedicure session. You mentioned your principle of not gossiping about one client to another, both because it disgusts you and just to avoid trouble at work. And I really don't know anything about your other clients. Yes, Patricia, and you wouldn't have known, clients' personal lives are none of my business, and we're not friends with them. If it were someone else in your place, I would have just kept quiet. But we still have good human relations, and I value that. Alandra, don't keep me in suspense. Patricia smiled. I'm burning with curiosity inside. Soon I'll start burning on the outside. All right, here's the deal. 2 months ago, a new client started coming to me. Nothing atypical for Neapolis, a well-groomed blonde, maybe 28 at most, dresses with a claim to style, but really just flashy, not a stick, will definitely gain weight by 40. In conversation, she often pretends to be a delicate little fairy, although she's probably not. She loves to assert herself, telling about the gifts she receives from her boyfriend, various trips, enthusiastically showing off her purchases. She wants me to be impressed too. And I was impressed. It's part of my job. I don't mind, and it pleases the person. They'll come back here with pleasure, specifically to me. I don't care what to support the client in, as long as they're not a scandalous jerk, and all the rest are good girls. In general, everything was as usual. And then the day before yesterday, my client Alba comes in, all beautiful and tanned, saying she just returned from some heavenly Mediterranean place, perfect for June. Oh, now I remember, it was Cyprus. She spent a week there with her boyfriend. Just a week only because he's some business type, always busy, as I understood it, otherwise he'd be sailing her around without a break. I congratulated her, noted how good she looked. She immediately pulled out her phone and started chirping, showing photos and telling stories. Here they are eating tiny delicate stuffed calamari. Here he bought her a collector's ring from some fancy jeweler. While I was doing her jelly French in orange tones, she couldn't stop talking. The mood to share personal stuff just hit her. Turns out, her boyfriend is quite a mature guy, recently turned 42. Of course, he's married, but he hasn't loved his wife for a long time. He just lived out of habit until he met her, Alba. The wife has been trying to boss him around all her life, only cares about herself, all wrapped up in her work and their daughter's education. She drills the same convictions into their daughter. How important it is to find your own path, but it's all just for show. The wife is daddy's little girl, always had everything handed to her, never had to struggle in life, didn't even have to live solely on her own earnings. First her dad took care of her, then her husband. With such starting opportunities, anyone can find themselves. But he had to achieve everything from scratch, even from a negative starting point, without help, only obstacles. It's a completely different attitude towards life. He and his wife are totally different people. Alba would have understood this even without his words as soon as she stepped into his apartment. He brought her home several times while his wife was away. You can tell from the atmosphere that she's his wife, but for him, the main thing is to receive warmth from her. He'll provide everything else. Well, and so on. What a wonderful and misunderstood guy Alba's boyfriend is. Alba is his saving grace in life, and he talks about it so often, even though she doesn't ask, that he surely loves her. In general, Patricia, I hear stories like this not so rarely, but Alba was particularly sparkling with emotions. She had just met with a friend, had champagne, and came to me still in that mood. And at the end, she even decided to show me a photo with her beloved. Check it out, she said. How do you like it, honestly? I prepared to cautiously approve, to say that I somewhat understand her, and then I looked at the very first photo and saw your husband, Olivio, standing arm in arm with Alba against the backdrop of an Italian seaside restaurant, then another joint photo by the jewelry store window, well, and several more, at the bar and pool in the hotel, by the sea, on Aphrodite's beach. She showed about 20 photos, sighed. Well, there you go, you see, we're good together, you can't hide it. As Alandra spoke, Patricia forgot about her coffee and now hurriedly drank it in 2 gulps. Alandra fell silent, caught her breath, and added, "I think it's right that I told you. Sorry it wasn't immediately after Alba left. I was in some kind of stupor. I understand with my mind that I should say something, but this is really the first time someone has confided in me like this, and this is how I handle their trust. On the other hand, if a person is foolish enough to show off photos of their married lover to everyone, something like this would have happened sooner or later anyway." Alandra, "Yes, thank you," Patricia quickly and quietly interrupted. "This isn't gossip, this is help. Thanks again for the help. This isn't the kind of situation where it's better not to know the truth. I've always considered myself capable of digesting the truth. Your reputation in the salon won't suffer at all. I'll come up with another source of information. And I won't rush to confront Alba either. In general, don't worry, I'm perfectly rational." Patricia gave a wry smile and rose from the table. "Well, I should get going. You'll still be working late, Alandra. And I'm off to a photo exhibition. It's both work-related and a chance to wander around, sort things out in my head. I'll probably give you a call in a week or so, schedule a pedicure, once I figure out my own schedule. Bye, dear." "Bye, make sure to call," Alandra could only say, astonished and flustered. She couldn't even understand if it was a good thing when a woman held herself together so well. Most of Alandra's acquaintances would have found a sackful of insulting words for the husband and mistress by now, and would have gone to confront them right away, and surely no one would remember Alandra's reputation. She had immediately sensed, from the first meeting, the intuition of someone who had long worked with people. This Patricia, she was an interesting person, and it was because of clients like her that Alandra could love her job. Grandma Isadora. If she were alive, she would have bitterly said, "I told you so." For her, it was crucial to be proven right when her insightful predictions came true. Yet Patricia couldn't recall a single instance where her grandmother predicted a positive outcome. All bold endeavors of relatives and acquaintances, whether in work or personal life, were doomed to fail if they didn't adhere to Grandma's strict standards. These standards were based on the unyielding "this is how it should be." Pointing out the weaknesses in her worldview was futile. She instantly became blind and deaf, and any logic would shatter against this wall. It's entirely possible that because of her own mother's character, her son Rico Rowland, Patricia's father, turned out so composed and ironic. In debates with such a rock-like figure as Grandma, one could either develop a thick skin or realize that arguing with her was quite absurd. Aren't there enough normal names? And besides, women with difficult, rare names are seldom happy. I heard about such an omen somewhere. "Mom, why did you then name me that?" the son responded inquisitively, maintaining his trademark composure. "The name Rico is of ancient Roman origin." "Patricia Rowland sounds good enough, let's stick with it." "All right, let's forget silly omens, the greatest has spoken." When Grandma Isadora realized she had lost the battle, she sulked briefly, waited for a new opportunity for outrage or prediction, but it would be naive to think that she had forgotten her old warnings. Whenever something went awry in any affair, behind the backs of the participants, as if out of thin air, Grandma would emerge with her "See, I told you so." Often, Grandma's reaction was harder to endure than the incident itself, so everyone tried their best to hide all their mistakes from her until the very end. When Patricia was getting married to Olivio, Grandma was particularly distraught. "Well, is that how it's supposed to be?" She shook the air in the large room, pacing the parquet floor. "You've been reading those silly books about alliances and think that a happy marriage can come out of such a misunderstanding. No, I'm not saying that Olivio doesn't like you. Compared to the girls from their district, you're quite impressive, I'm more than sure of that. But he's truly in love with the opportunities this marriage opens up for him. Not every guy from the neighborhood, that's what they call it nowadays, right? Gets this lucky. He sees perfectly well that your father will help his son-in-law. You grew up in sheltered conditions and have no idea how those like him have been clawing their way through life since childhood. It's written in his eyes and on his forehead that he knows how to instantly spot his advantage. He's just using you to climb higher. Granny, what's wrong with that, even if Olivio's father helps? I remember very well what you yourself said. talent should be helped, mediocrity will make it on its own. Olivio will work in his field of expertise, which he studied at the institute he entered, by the way, on his own, while also working and studying. Who cares about your family background nowadays if you behave decently? Certainly not me or the people I associate with. And if we listen to you, our family is some kind of close circle to the emperor. Just ordinary folks, we even sometimes don't have enough money. You don't have enough money only because your father, and even more so your mother, are spendthrifts, Grandma managed to interject. Your mother can waste money in a couple of months that a sensible person would live on for a year. That's her special talent. Fine. And when is your foolish wedding? We need to book a banquet hall in advance, one that won't be too cramped for guests. Crowding ruins even the best organized banquet. Isadora, we're just renting a small cafe. We decided that only the closest friends, a couple of friends from both sides, will be there. Grandma's outrage took a new turn. What about the other relatives? There are at least 20 Santas alone. Aren't you going to invite them? Weddings and funerals, occasions to gather the whole family, that's how it's supposed to be. As usual, about a month after the modest yet tasteful wedding in a narrow circle, when Patricia and Olivio returned from their honeymoon, Grandma had already resigned herself to all the glaring violations of order and traditions. But contrary to Patricia's hopes, Isadora made an exception for Olivio. Until the end of her days, she faithfully and steadfastly held a grudge against him. Yes, Grandma, you didn't live to see your triumph. I'd like to think that you would have been more saddened for me than pleased with your foresight. And Mom didn't live to see it either. She would have just sympathized, although there would have been tears galore. Patricia was circling the exhibition for the third time, lingering by those photographs that portrayed her in a more favorable light, and she was already being suspiciously eyed from her seat by the aunt caretaker. In any case, she couldn't avoid the conversation. She just had to endure it only once, but not in this apartment. She definitely wouldn't be able to return there anytime soon. She needed the nauseous emotions to settle down a bit. Tonight she would simply go to her father's and tell him everything as it is, and Catalina would have to call her daughter and tell her, but Catalina should wait a little longer, let her daughter finish her exams. There's still a week left. There are those tedious people who don't live their own lives and don't let others live either. They're the ones who came up with the idea that living for pleasure is some shameful desire, when in reality, everyone wants that. They just can't make it happen, so they come up with pretty justifications for themselves. But no one has explained convincingly why she, Alba, should live the same way as her mother from paycheck to paycheck, with eternal thrift, primarily on herself. No, of course, she may want more, but then she should diligently study and then work diligently. If you pretend to be interested in the prosperity of someone else's uncle's business, you'll make a career. You'll get into management someday, when you're already tired, exhausted, and almost old. Anyway, without successful parents, you'll still burst your belly button, and there are no guarantees of future prosperity. So living for pleasure is the most reasonable aspiration. But, of course, such an opportunity won't just appear on its own. But fortunately, for girls, a proven path has long been invented: generous men. Of course, there are fewer generous men nowadays, but they're not as rare as some failures try to prove. You just need to grasp the essence of what exactly the man lacks for happiness and give it to him. And in return, he'll want to take care of you himself. Absolutely no deception, everything is fair. Two people love each other, each gives the other what they can. The girl gives love and tenderness, the man gives care and protection. There's nothing better than old classics, claimed Alba's ex-boyfriend, with whom she came to this city. Although he said it about a different matter, it also applies to relationships between men and women. Alba's ex-boyfriend, Paolo, was a musician. He played superbly on both electric and regular guitar. In their small sleepy town, where it was generally impossible to earn decently, his earnings were considered good. They were invited to family corporate events together with DJ Santiago by everyone who could afford anything besides food. A party without them was considered poor, so everyone who wanted to demonstrate wealth invited these too. As a result, Paolo always had enough money to live on, and his girlfriend could always count on interesting weekends, gifts, and urgent financial assistance in various situations. Alba's friends openly envied her, and their boyfriends quietly hated Paolo, who they usually lost to in comparison. However, Alba's mother didn't approve of her daughter's choice precisely because of the profession of her boyfriend. All this bohemian lifestyle is very unreliable. To Alba's objection that weddings and birthdays are unlikely to end, her mother replied, "Exactly, when life turns into an endless celebration, people just drink themselves to death without noticing, and the girls are constantly wagging their tails in front of them. A normal man's job would be much more reliable." "Yeah, just like our dad, I've heard," Alba rolled her eyes. "Of course, nobody drinks in garages, and there's definitely no energy left for girls, and there's no money for them either. 100% reliability. Don't be rude, Mom, you owe us everything. First, achieve something yourself, and then consider yourself smarter than us." Mom immediately switched to shouting. In such cases, Alba would immediately start crying. It was a surefire method. Her daughter's tears always stopped her mother. She was such a kind person that not taking advantage of this was simply stupid. "Oh, do whatever you want," she grumbled mockingly, instantly lowering her voice, waving her hand, "it's your life." As for Paolo, Mom turned out to be wrong, but DJ Santiago, indeed, began to let his partner down more and more often, going out on benders when he could have been making money. Paolo was nervous and reflected aloud, sharing his thoughts with Alba. "We've hit a dead end here, Alba. At first, when I was just a kid, everything was fine, but now we need to move forward. Alone, without a DJ, you won't earn as much, and Santiago doesn't need anything anymore, as long as they keep pouring drinks for him, and it's useless to talk. He immediately looks at me like an enemy. More and more often I think I should go work in a big city. I wouldn't aim for the capital right away, but the regional center would be just right. I've saved up some money for the first time, enough to rent an apartment for 6 months, live, look around, find something. Would you go with me?" Alba wasn't sure if Paolo was asking seriously, but just in case, she hurried to answer. "Don't doubt it for a minute. I'm sure everything will work out for my Paolo." Alba didn't even want to imagine that Paolo would go somewhere alone. Then she could forget about him right away, and finding another guy like him without leaving their town would be difficult. Going through acquaintances who showed even the slightest interest in her, Alba realized she wouldn't have such beautiful relationships with any of them. Everyone had their own problems. Some were financially supported by their parents, some saved money for major purchases. That's how life went. Of course, there were owners of stores and small food production facilities in the town, but they were all family businesses, with children, and the local gossip mongers closely followed the lives of these local stars. It wasn't uncommon for girls Alba had known since childhood to leave to study or work in big cities, but Alba herself wouldn't dare to leave home alone. Of course, she didn't want to spend her whole life working in the accounting department of the local car depot, but for now, it would do. Moving to a big city meant spending the first few years' salaries on rent, saving on everything, cooking dinner for tomorrow herself in the evenings. Alba valued her comfort too much to sign up for all of that. At least at home, Mom takes care of the household chores, but if you go somewhere not alone, but with caring Paolo, maybe that's a chance. Paolo wasn't joking. He met a guy through some online community who was looking for a guitarist for a band that played at parties. It was a familiar topic to Paolo. They even managed to secure a contract with some mediocre restaurant for the summer season. "Well, Alba, are we going?" Paolo asked in a serious tone, demanding an immediate answer. "We're going, Paolo." Mom was in shock when she found out about such a sudden decision, and when she realized she couldn't dissuade her daughter, she begged her not to tell her father in advance. She would tell him when Alba was already gone. Of course, Dad would still make noise, but not as long as he would if Alba were in front of him. The head accountant at the car depot, upon receiving Alba's resignation letter, disdainfully curled her lips and warned, "There's a line of candidates waiting to take Alba's place, so she'd better hurry. And if things don't work out for the girl in the big city, they won't take her back. The position will just be filled. These positions are practically passed down by inheritance. Have you seriously thought about this? Have you weighed everything, Alba? The head accountant generously asked one last time. Seriously, Teresa, confirmed Alba. Leaving the car depot, she hesitated to even look back. Honestly, she was scared that she had risked changing everything in her stable life like this. The euphoria of moving to the big city lasted only a few days. Alba quickly realized that everything didn't go as planned, and she had to accept that, at least for now. This city was changing Paulo quickly. He wasn't the most generous Paulo she knew and loved in their hometown anymore. He said they needed to save until he started earning. Alba, my darling, this isn't forever. We just need to get a foothold here. You see for yourself, we're paying for this one-bedroom apartment as much as for a penthouse. So let's just have dinner at home for now. I don't need Michelin-starred restaurants. Some fried potatoes with meat will do. You asked 5 minutes ago if there were any responses to my resume, Alba reminded him. Are you saying that after working in the accounting office, I'll have to fry potatoes too? Sweetheart, what's the difference between you and me? Paulo stared with honest eyes. When I'm free in the evenings, I'll cook. I won't dump all the household chores on you, don't worry. I don't respect such men myself. Let's get a bit richer, make more money, and we'll treat you to restaurants more often. From Paulo's tone, it was clear that enrichment would come in a couple of months at most. In reality, after 6 months, Alba could already compile a whole list of bitter warnings for inexperienced girls who decided to move like this. She mournfully realized that her life wasn't getting any better. There were so many tempting ways to spend time around her, but suddenly there were no opportunities. 5 days a week, she worked in the accounting department of a small manufacturing plant and earned more than in her hometown. But the landlord raised the rent, and Paulo's earnings remained inconsistent. He didn't get along with the band leader who invited him here, and while he was trying to survive independently, it filled Alba with quiet horror. What was he waiting for? For the money to run out and to have to return home, feeling the smirks of acquaintances behind her back. Didn't manage to conquer the world, huh? They drifted apart more and more from each other. Paulo stopped being tender and attentive, stopped babying her, and would angrily cook his potatoes or eggs. Alba tried to have lunch at a cheap cafe in the business center where she worked and hardly had dinner at all, just to avoid messing around in the kitchen. She felt that something needed to change, but had no idea how. She was more accustomed to relying on luck than on herself. Grateful luck did indeed soon smile on Alba. She finally met a man she had long had her eye on and managed to impress him with her gentle manners. Her new hero commuted to work in the same large business center in the city center as she did, driving a not too new but quite decent car. Mature, probably around 40 or a little older, he was unlikely to be an ordinary manager. Their suits subtly resembled neat uniforms, while his was stylishly dressed, with various interesting accessories, and clearly not cheap. Noticing and appreciating him, Alba even decided to make some expenses. She stopped getting coffee at the cheap cafe where she had her business lunch and switched to the trendy cafe he frequented. Soon the pleasant stranger began to recognize her familiar gentle face at the table by the column and would warmly nod at Alba when he noticed her in the cafe. And soon he developed a habit to look towards that table first thing upon entering. To avoid premature joy, Alba decided to test her hunch. She changed her favorite spot and chose another table in a dark corner. She couldn't contain her triumph. The interesting stranger began to wander his gaze perplexedly over all the tables, and when he noticed her, he couldn't help but smile broadly. So, he did remember her after all. Now there was an eagerness to somehow accelerate the development of events. Alba got along well with her boss, the head accountant. They worked together in a miniature office, separate from the production, as it was more profitable for the owner. When there are only two of you, you inevitably get to know each other better. Alba couldn't hide her surprise when she learned that the head accountant, Amanda Hernandez, was her mother's peer. She looked much younger, spoke and thought about something else entirely. Alba decided to subtly show Amanda her stranger and ask her if Amanda knew who he was. Yes, interesting, confirmed Amanda. No, I don't know. He's already too young for me. I don't get into such adventures. I'm more comfortable with Piers. I don't have to worry about not measuring up. But he's perfect for you. He's older, and you're young and beautiful to him anyway, and Piers take your beauty for granted. Amanda could keep a conversation about men going for a long time if it wasn't reporting season. Her ability to switch gears and instantly become a different person was enviable. When she was the boss, Amanda became so businesslike and official that Alba even feared her. And you should ask the bartenders, suggested Amanda. There are some good guys working there. Both of them clearly wouldn't mind helping out a girl like you. Alba did just that the next day. Indeed, why hadn't she ever chatted with the bartender before, even though she'd known him for a while? Contrary to Alba's fears, the bartender, Eduardo, didn't even smirk and approached the question professionally indifferently. He's an old, loyal customer. He's been with us since the day we opened, my favorite type, doesn't nitpick, happy with everything, especially since everything here is really top-notch. He doesn't chat with the staff, but you're familiar, his name is Olivio. They have a small firm, the office is a floor below yours, they trade some tech equipment and components with the Koreans. There's a technical director, a deputy general, but I can't really say much more than that. If you need my personal opinion. Do you need my opinion? Eduardo interrupted himself with a question directed at Alba. Yes, of course, go ahead, she allowed. He's a decent guy, calm, well-mannered, self-possessed, I would say, maybe a little too self-possessed. So, he's smart, Alba laughed. She was prepared to hear something important and not very pleasant. This oddball Eduardo expressed himself in her mother's words, self-possessed. Until recently, the once nameless stranger Olivio had been growing on Alba more and more. All evening, she leisurely contemplated the most likely obstacle. He was probably married. She hadn't had any experience with married men yet, but one thing she knew for sure, if a person was calm, well-mannered, and not poor, by the age of 40, he was definitely married. There was nothing she could do about it. Even if he was divorced, it wouldn't be for long. Don't get involved with married men. Her mother's admonition came to mind before she left, when she suddenly came to see Alba off at the station, even though she hadn't planned to. Paolo had just rushed off to buy mineral water, and they were left alone on the platform. Alba smiled in surprise then. She was going with Paolo. Where did such thoughts come from? Did her mother somehow guess that she and Paolo would quickly go their separate ways in the big city? Alba still considered her mom narrow-minded. Turns out, her mom was also quite self-possessed. The next day, Alba caught a cold and spent 3 days in bed in the rented apartment. It was good that at least Paolo wasn't flashing before her eyes. He was running errands, getting acquainted with a new group he hoped to play with, trying to find his place there. In the evenings, he shared his impressions of the new acquaintances with Alba. She struggled to pretend she was listening. After all, she was sick, he should understand. When she came to work, Amanda greeted her with a mysterious smile and immediately shared the news. On Friday, I went to your favorite cafe to have a cup of mochaccino, and it turned out to be really delicious there. While sipping my coffee at the counter, your Olivio walks in, scans all the tables, doesn't find anyone interesting, and it's clear he's contemplating something. Suddenly, he asks the bartender, who was Alberto on Friday, the girl who usually sits at the table by the column, is she not coming here anymore? And I casually joined the conversation, your girl caught a slight cold. As her boss, I regret it, and I'm sure she does too. Maybe this way she'll recover faster. By the way, her name is Alba. He gave me a slight, restrained smile and said, yes, please tell her that the neighbors at the tables are already worried. Thank you very much. That's how it went, my dear. Amanda winked at Alba, very pleased with herself, and immediately handed her a stack of fresh invoices. Alba liked to recall the details of her acquaintance with Olivio. It was as if they just needed a little push towards each other, and Amanda's intervention served as that push. Everything suddenly became much simpler. When Alba was having her coffee at the usual time, Olivio walked into the cafe with a welcoming smile and headed straight to her table. Never before had Alba's introduction to a man gone so smoothly, never had everything fallen into place so successfully from the first day. Before she could even look around, Olivia declared that their relationship had become an important part of his life. How ironically, Amanda chuckled, the wheel of fate had turned. It seemed like this was the rarely occurring chance, and all Alba had to do was take a small risk with something insignificant. She didn't hesitate for long. However one looked at it, her relationship with Paolo had run its course, and going back home was not an option. It would be admitting defeat, and that's exactly what the envious and competitive ones were waiting for. Life there wouldn't be satisfactory anymore, only second-rate. So, Alba informed Paolo that she was moving out of the apartment. "Alba, I understand you're tired," Paolo began. "I get it. I promised you brilliant prospects, but things didn't turn out as planned. But I wasn't lying. I genuinely believed it myself. Let's just calm down and wait a little longer. Things are just starting to fall into place as they should. Don't be difficult, please. Do you hear me at all, or just yourself, as always?" Alba asked wearily, with indifferent irritation. "Who's talking about being difficult? I agreed to the first decent job I found, and you're still picking and choosing. If you haven't noticed, I've been paying for this apartment on my own for the past 2 months, and you're fine with that, apparently." "Did I say I was fine with that?" Paolo grumbled, his frustration showing. "Whether you said it or not, what's the difference?" Alba interrupted, already tired of this conversation from the first few minutes. "If things are going well for you now, then I have even less reason to worry. You'll be able to afford this place on your own, and I found another one, cheaper, and I'll manage on my own." Paolo, of course, didn't believe that she was serious about leaving. He was accustomed to the fact that his Alba never liked making decisions, and she was uncomfortable living independently. Alba was a little offended that it never occurred to him that she might have found another man. She didn't bother laying her cards on the table. She simply calmly packed her things into her suitcase, called a taxi, and left. Olivia found her a studio apartment, very small but cozy, with everything necessary, unlike their rundown apartment inherited from Paolo's grandmother. Olivia argued that the rent was very low because his landlord was a good friend of his. By the way, Alba wouldn't have to pay anything. Olivia could easily handle that amount himself without affecting his budget. What else Alba found appealing about him was that he immediately disclosed that he was married, that all feelings had long since cooled, but there was no reason for a divorce, so he just lived by inertia, as many people do. Alba was aware that all married lovers said more or less the same thing, but for some reason, she stubbornly believed that her case was special. Well, there were special cases too, and something had to be done. Some push was needed to persuade Olivia to divorce his wife and marry her, Alba. It was a difficult task. She couldn't act abruptly and thoughtlessly. She could irreparably ruin everything. And then Lady Luck smiled dazzlingly at Alba again. Olivia's wife filed for divorce after somehow finding out about her husband's infidelity. Olivia was initially so stunned that he was left speechless by the unexpected turn of events. According to him before, getting a divorce from his wife seemed very difficult, and Alba believed it. Successful and established men don't just let go easily. He had mentioned that his daughter, Catalina, was studying in the big city. She was only in her second year, almost a child and very sensitive. There were no guarantees that she would take her parents' divorce lightly, so Olivia and Alba had to wait a little. And while Alba was pondering how to persuade Olivia to put his daughter on the back burner, his wife quickly made a decision, disregarding her daughter's feelings: a divorce. Olivia's wife seemed to genuinely possess an annoyingly principled character. She even moved out of the apartment right away, saying she didn't need anything from him anymore. "Well, that's for the best," almost cheerful Olivia declared, beginning to believe in his freedom. "Then move in with me, we'll live together. That's what you want too, right?" "Of course, my love," Alba hastened to assure him. "Why pay extra for my rental hovel? We'll make better use of it together," Olivia chimed in. Amanda advised Alba to constantly demonstrate her understanding and support to Olivia. "Now is the perfect time to show him what he'll gain if he marries you. He shouldn't doubt that it's necessary for him, otherwise, my friend once had a case. She waited for 5 years for her married lover to finally divorce, but when he did, he kept delaying the new marriage, making excuses. And one fine day, my friend found out that he married someone else, some young girl, saying that marrying mistresses is in bad taste. Can you believe that? It happens. So, if your Olivio is inviting you to live together, agree. At least you'll have him under your nose more often, and you'll also see what he's like in everyday life. In everyday life, Olivio wasn't finicky, and his character turned out to be steady, unlike Paolo's, who justified his bouts of gloomy grumbling by claiming to be a creative person. Alba silently praised herself. She did everything right, a more understanding, tender, and cheerful companion than her could hardly be found even after years of searching. She had so fully embraced her role that she even volunteered to accompany Olivio to court for the divorce proceedings. I can see you're nervous, Olivio. There's nothing shameful about it. Anyone in your place would be nervous. If I go with you, it will guarantee that your ex won't try any tricks. Her pride won't allow her to show any hostility in front of me. I know women like her, just trust me, Alba assured him. Olivio didn't object, and they went to court together. Olivio's wife, Patricia, turned out to be exactly as Alba had imagined her from the photos, a slender brunette with a somewhat cold smile, absolutely nothing outstanding, too lazy even to do her hair or nails properly, yet carried herself like a queen. She lazily walked past Olivio and Alba, smirked mysteriously, and made a slight hand gesture, as if weighing the thin folder of documents she was carrying. Perhaps someone joked that she had a Mona Lisa smile, and she believed it. Overall, she seemed overly self-assured. The court session was open, but such proceedings didn't attract spectators. It wasn't a criminal trial, too boring for the public. So, in the courtroom, which smelled heavily of dust from the folds of heavy curtains and massive closets, there were only the judge with the clerk, Olivio and Alba, and Olivio's wife, who was about to become his ex. Alba paid little attention to the judge's words. It was easy to get confused trying to understand these legal terms. It was only clear that the parties didn't agree to reconcile. Alba was almost nodding off from the dull legal jargon when suddenly it felt like someone had yanked the blanket off her. The judge said, "Patricia, can you provide the court with documents stating that the aforementioned apartment is to remain solely in your possession after the divorce?" "Yes, Your Honor, here they are." Patricia rose from her seat and, with a light stride and no rush, approached the judge, handing over the same thin folder that Alba had noticed during their meeting. From the moment the judge took the documents until she spoke again, an eternity seemed to pass. At least that's how it felt to Alba. She cast a cautious glance at Olivio's face, and for a moment, it seemed to her that his complexion paled beneath his sun-kissed skin. He seemed to shrink somehow and bore no resemblance to the respectable man she had fallen in love with and left Paolo for without a second thought, the man she had spent several years with. Alba felt a sense of confusion and even alarm. "Yes, indeed, the apartment was bequeathed to you by your late mother before your marriage." "Patricia, did your husband contribute financially to improving the living conditions, for example, by investing in renovations?" Olivio even opened his mouth, preparing to say something, not waiting for the judge to address him, but Patricia spoke first. "No, Your Honor. The apartment underwent renovations twice, and once there was even a legally approved redevelopment, but these expenses were covered by my father, Rico Rowland. He's a meticulous man. I'm sure the receipts are still there. I can provide them if necessary. He also hired the team of workers. They're still working together, so they can confirm who settled the bills with them." "Thank you, Patricia." "Olivio," the judge impartially turned to Olivio, "as far as the court knows, the apartment where you lived with your spouse isn't your only property?" "No, Your Honor," Olivio admitted somewhat gloomily. "I didn't financially contribute to my wife's apartment renovation because I was saving money to buy my own property. I hope you understand I didn't want to feel like a parasite just because my wife came from a well-off family. 5 years ago, I purchased a studio apartment." "Is that the same studio you allegedly rented for me?" Alba wanted to interject immediately. If they weren't in such an inappropriate place as the court, she would demand Olivia to clarify the situation right away. So, it turned out, he wasn't the provider or protector in this family, it was his wife's daddy. And Patricia herself didn't seem helpless at all. What a fool you are, Alba, she thought. You were surprised when Patricia filed for divorce herself. Any woman would do the same when she has nothing to lose except for a husband who flirts with girls, thinking he's cool. I wonder what Olivia was even counting on in his relationship with her, with Alba. That she would accept his mediocrity and continue to love him just as he is? But he's just another Paolo, honest to God. Where do they get this idea that they're just what someone needs? There were so many questions swirling in her mind that she had no energy left to play the affectionate kitten, but she couldn't cause a scene in the courtroom to please that bony Patricia. I need to step out, she whispered quietly to Olivia, got up from her chair, picked up her purse, and quietly made her way along the wall toward the exit of the courtroom. She didn't even notice how she ended up outside. And it's so hot, you can suffocate. I need some cold water, not just to drink, but to pour over my head to cool down. Alba stood in the middle of the sidewalk for a couple more minutes, then quickly, almost running, hurried away from the courthouse building. Patricia was afraid she might feel sorry for her husband's paramour. She didn't consider all wives saints or all mistresses heartless. Life wasn't so primitive. Alandra had painted a picture for her of a girl you could genuinely feel sorry for. She went hunting and thought she caught the firebird by the tail, but ended up with some scrawny goose in her hands. They both were deceived in their expectations, so it was pointless for Olivia's mistress to glare at her with such tense dislike in front of the courthouse. When her father learned about the impending divorce, he immediately asked, "Aren't you having second thoughts? I've often seen how women forgive their husbands for such escapades over time, and family life really gets back on track. Or am I old-fashioned?" "No, Daddy," Patricia sadly smiled. "You're not original in your opinion. Adventure is one thing, but Olivia's situation isn't just a moment of madness or a closed loop. He didn't live with me out of love or any special feeling for someone else. He lived with me out of convenience. This job of yours, quite cushy and financially rewarding, this apartment, the opportunity to relax. He's not stupid, and he knows perfectly well that he jumped over 2 steps by becoming my husband at some point. I even considered it normal, and so did you. Thank you. He could have at least shown some basic decency by keeping quiet about me to her, but he day after day described to her how I'm a commander, cold, domineering ice queen. He could have lied about something closer to reality." "Yes, indeed, what nonsense," agreed the father, patting his Patricia's hand and hastily embracing her. Rico had already bid farewell to Olivia the next day after Patricia filed for divorce. Of course, Patricia didn't need to know about her father's joyful emotions, but finally, he had a reason to get rid of this careless fellow whom he kept around only out of love for his daughter and that silly old-fashioned idea of paternal duty. Olivia tried to remain composed, but he couldn't. "I understand your feelings, Rico," he said pompously, but somehow unconvincingly. "But I'm convinced that you're an objective person and don't mix personal matters with work. If a new employer needs references from my previous job, can you provide them?" "Unfortunately, Olivia," Rico said in a soft, confidential tone, "I've so tangled up work with personal matters that I'm sick of myself. If I had hired you off the street from a job ad devil knows how many years ago, we would have worked together for at most 6 months and then parted ways either by mutual consent or by my peaceful initiative, for sure. Nothing personal, I just wanted to create a family business and made a mistake. You stubbornly pretended not to notice my hints that contributing more to the business would leave a better impression. In simpler terms, it was all on me. Do you have anything to object? Thanks for at least silently admitting I'm right. Of course, I won't ruin your resume, write whatever you want in it. But recommending you to someone, that's going too far. No, I could recommend you to competitors for a key position, of course, but these gentlemen would consider it mockery, and I still stand for civilized business." Rico watched with pleasure as Olivia struggled to hide his irritation and confusion. Rico didn't consider himself a vengeful person, but right now, He felt no shame for enjoying his pleasant feelings. It's just a pity that it won't help his daughters overcome their disappointment any faster or easier. Alba packed her belongings from the emptied closet into suitcases and cursed herself gloomily. I should have guessed how this would end when I found out that Olivio left his job. I didn't even think about what a worrying sign that was. Olivio immediately dulled her vigilance with his purring. She should have stayed until the end of the session, not run away like a little cowardly fool. She would have probably found out that her beloved was also working for his wife or her family. She wouldn't have been surprised by anything after learning about this apartment. That's why she's so unlucky, why she keeps ending up with the wrong ones. It was too pleasant to mistake desire for reality, and that's how she got caught. It's necessary to clarify everything thoroughly from the start, not rely on luck. Apparently, Alba has a complicated relationship with luck. Now the main thing is to gather all her belongings, including gifts, and slip out of the apartment before Olivio returns. He probably already has excuses and plausible justifications planned. And she might give in to weakness and forgive him. He's so imposing, even on Cyprus they looked at them enviously. They're such a beautiful couple, rare to find. And she truly allowed herself to fall in love, without ensuring it was safe. To run, and then decide where on the go. Alba suddenly flinched. She'd been busy with her things and hadn't managed it. The key was inexorably turning in the lock. Alba managed to assume a casual posture, freezing in place. The landlady stood in the doorway. Olivio rode home from the trial so exhausted that he even remembered a long-forgotten labor duty in his parents' garden, planting and digging potatoes. After that trial, the same dull fatigue pervaded his body. Yes, he came from an ordinary family where they grew food in the garden. As if he would surprise someone with that. And every other one of those smooth and sweet talkers who know how to blind women comes from such a family. And Alba is exactly the same, though she pretends to be carefree and glamorous. They are very alike in reality, that's why they get along so well. The main thing is to convince Alba of that now. Losing both the remnants of a comfortable life and his mistress in one day would be too much. He needs to find the words to reassure her and convince her to move back to his studio. It won't be so difficult. Right now, she doesn't even have anywhere to spend the night. Decent rental housing isn't found in a matter of hours, especially when there's no connections. Nothing happens quickly without them. Olivio was sure he would quickly find a suitable job, at least by the appointed date of the divorce process. It didn't work out. What was offered for his usual fee was supposed to take up 25 hours a day, and the usual volume and content of work paid quite modestly. Everyone wants a canary for a penny, that's the reality. Alba is needed by him now more than ever, to avoid falling into despair completely. When he settles into a decent position, then it will be seen how to proceed. The door to the apartment only seemed closed, it wasn't locked. Such a careless girl, she's so disheartened that she even forgot to lock it. Come in, whoever you want, take whatever you want. And there are still plenty of his things here that need to be taken out before Patricia shows up. Well, at least it's good that Alba didn't think to disappear. Women like her are fond of theatrical effects. Suddenly, laughter and women's voices came from the kitchen. Forgetting that he was about to take off his shoes, Olivio grew taller in the kitchen doorway. The dining table was adorned with little vases of strawberries, candied fruits, and pastries, with a bottle of champagne towering above it all. Sitting comfortably at the table, like old friends, were Alba and Patricia. "Hello," they both said almost simultaneously, indifferently, without any malice, upon seeing Olivio in the doorway, and raised their glasses, exchanging fox-like glances. "To us, the beautiful and the wise." "Celebrating?" Olivio managed to ask. "Why not?" Patricia replied calmly. "We're marking the day we rid ourselves of unnecessary baggage." "I'm the baggage, of course." "Well, understood, I get the revenge of a scorned woman. But you, Alba, how are you involved in this celebration? I distinctly remember telling you that my ex-wife is a master at using people for her own ends. So you're very mistaken if you think she sympathizes with you." Our Patricia is devoid of this skill. She didn't even think to wait until I gathered and removed my things from the apartment before coming here. She couldn't resist the pleasure of humiliating me one last time. To your disappointment, my dear ex, it doesn't affect me. I can see how it doesn't affect you. Thanks for the entertainment, Patricia replied almost amiably. Alba, let's go pack our things. Olivia switched to a businesslike tone, instantly deciding it was wiser to ignore Patricia for now. Alba had no intention of moving. On the contrary, she settled in more comfortably, took the biggest strawberry from the vase, and announced, rounding her eyes, I wonder on what grounds you're ordering me around. You never made an official proposal to me. An invitation to live together isn't a proposal. And after your lies, I consider myself a free girl. I've already packed my things. I'm talking to the landlady. We're enjoying ourselves, understanding each other, and you can go about your business calmly. I have no claims against you. Looking straight at Olivia, Alba wrinkled her nose amusingly, as she did when she saw a spider or a frog. What, playing someone else's role now? Olivia said disdainfully. Your previous sweet talk suited you much better. At least it had some purpose, gifts, travels. So you're mistaken, Alba. You shouldn't confuse yourself with Patricia. She can afford to put on airs. She's Daddy's girl. She's our bold designer because she'll never burn out on Daddy's support. But you're the former girlfriend of a street musician who will soon be going back to her village, counting wages for the workers at the logging enterprise. Do you think I would marry someone like you? Who would marry someone like you? You've got dollar signs in your eyes. You only dream of getting as much as you can out of a man's wallet. You just use men, and when they use you, you pretend to be offended and innocent. If anyone has the right to accuse me of lying, it's certainly not you. Your guitarist probably won't even take you back now. I'm sure he's already found someone simpler, without glamorous aspirations right on the spot. The holy and selfless citizen, we've heard enough of your speech, Patricia interrupted Olivia, still calm but quite loudly. Maintain the appearance of calmness. Please gather your things. Patricia spoke to Olivia like he was a rude teenager, while Alba sat silently, chewing strawberries with undisguised appetite and didn't look offended at all, although she should have, after everything that was said. Olivia imagined how humiliating it would be to rummage through the closets now, pulling out his pants and shirts amidst giggles from the kitchen, and simply left the apartment, loudly tossing the keys on the floor and slamming the door shut. Such a mature man, Patricia smirked. Yet he loves all this drama. Sorry if you got upset because of my idea. I didn't expect him to storm out like that. I still thought quite highly of him, after all. Well, I wasn't surprised at all, Alba declared. People like him treat any of us disrespectfully. No, I'm far from saintly. He's somewhat right about the dollar signs. All right, let's even say he's completely right, but to not miss out on me, he exaggerated how respectable he is. And I didn't even intend to lie to him. I honestly told him who I am and where I'm from, in what situation, and that I need support and patronage, not a paradise in a hut. He knew all this, and now, for some reason, he's offended. Alba shrugged, trying not to give in to Patricia's composure. Let me pay you for your service right away, Patricia remembered. Thank you. Not everyone would agree to stay until his arrival and pretend to show such female solidarity. I would add that not everyone would even suggest such a thing, Alba replied, neatly taking the bills laid out by Patricia from the table. When I saw you at the doorway, I was expecting a scandal, preparing to defend myself with suitcases. You must hate me. You have every right. I'm sure Olivia told you that I'm a terrible selfish person, Patricia laughed. It's true, I love myself, so I would regret wasting myself and my energy on hatred. I'm even grateful to you for showing up on time. I would have continued living, wasting my life on this Olivia and not known what kind of person he is. It's not even about this affair, he's just so petty and spiteful. I agree, Alba happily confirmed.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.